I remember talking some years ago with another Adam. This is Adam Grant at the University of Pennsylvania. And he told me there was a strong correlation between artists who are successful and artists who are prolific. You've looked at the same idea as well. Can you talk about how, in some ways, taking more shots on goal makes it more likely to also take really good shots on goal?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That quality and quantity are related strongly. That the more times you try, the more likely you are to hit on a success. And there are lots of reasons for that. One is that obviously by trying more, you learn what works and what doesn't. And so what you produce ultimately gets stronger over time. But also, sometimes it's hard to know what will succeed. And so let's say there are 10 different ways to do something. If you try 3 of them, you have a 3 in 10 chance of hitting whatever the jackpot is. If you try all 10, one of them is going to succeed. And so you need to have those misses in order to ultimately have the success in aggregate. And so that's it's a really important principle in any pursuit. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, but trying multiple approaches, experimenting, figuring out whether the dominant approach is the right one or whether you should try something a bit different is the way forward.
So you say that Jeff Tweedy has come up with an ingenious way of battling this challenge. What does he do?
Yeah, he has this great description. This term, he says he pours out the bad material. So the way he thinks about it, and I think this is true of a lot of creative enterprises, is the obvious stuff is stuff that's not particularly novel or interesting. And that's the stuff that sits at the top of your head. And what you've got to do is, if you imagine that all your ideas are essentially liquids sitting one on top of the other, you've got to pour out the bad stuff. And that's what Tweedy describes. He wakes up in the morning and he says, I've got to pour out the bad material. And what's incredibly liberating about that, in contrast to perfectionism, is this idea that you expect that to be mediocre. And that's okay, because the way you think about it is you're getting the bad stuff out of the way so the good stuff can emerge.
And so I understand he deliberately sometimes tries to pour out bad stuff. He tries to come up with bad stuff so the good stuff can then emerge?
Yeah, the nice thing about removing all requirements for quality is that quantity rises. And so if being unstuck is about moving forward, the idea that you don't care about quality, but you care only about something coming out, anything coming out, means that you get into this really great habit of actually making some progress later on. And by even trying to write bad songs, he finds that shows him what's good. Because by making something bad, if you're as successful and as talented as he is, it shows you something about what you're not looking for. And then later on, you use that as a sort of contrast point and you produce better material.
You write about the French artist Pierre Soulages, who has used a really unusual self-imposed restraint on himself in order to grant himself more freedom. What does he do?
Yeah. So Soulages talked about the fact that the business of art was very complex. You have just so many materials at your disposal. You have different media. And then, of course, once you narrow down the medium, you then still have to decide on color. And so what Soulages decided quite early on was that he was just going to use black paint. And by stripping away the question of color, of hue, he would leave himself with a much simpler set of decisions to make. And so he could really focus and refine his understanding of how to use that one tone of paint to create the works that he was making. And so he became known as the artist who only used black paint.
When you feel stuck because you have hit a dreaded plateau, the solution is to introduce change. Start a new kind of workout. If you're a writer of prose, try your hand at poetry. If you're a musician, try playing your instrument with your non-dominant hand.